All right, what is going on, Patriots fans? This is Jason Cole with the Patriots Drive podcast today, and it was officially day one of training camp. So we have some news, some thoughts on what was reported and what was seen at training camp, and we're really excited to get into this. But first, we want to thank you guys. We just hit 1,000 subscribers on the channel, so thank you guys for that. Lots more content, and if you guys are liking it, continue to like, subscribe, comment, share this with friends. And continue to support the channel. We appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get into the offensive side. Cole, what were some of your day one reactions to camp?
I think the biggest takeaway right off the bat is one of our newest additions to this offense in Devante Parker. He hauled in 3 touchdowns on the day, had a couple of them were kind of box out, contested catch, and that kind of just shows his ability as a receiver. And today was kind of more of a red zone day, it seemed like, and that's where you would expect his skill set to shine, and it did. So he was as advertised, as expected. He kind of so far, I mean, it's one day, it's early, but after one day, it looks like he's what N'Keal Harry hasn't been and what we expected him to be. So I'm excited to see what Devante Parker continues to do. It was a good day for the receivers in general. Nelson Aguilar had a touchdown. He had a nice catch. Taiwan Thornton, the rookie, had a couple touchdowns. So overall, is it good offense or bad defense? And that's kind of what we'll end up seeing as the season progresses and as training camp progresses. But so far, early on, the wide receivers look good, and that was my biggest takeaway right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of rare, and we haven't seen it this often, to see a receiver come in and day one immediate impact like we heard from Devante Parker. And that's what we were expecting, a bigger bodied receiver, 6'3", guy that goes up. He has a knack for making contested catches. He's top 3 in the league in the past 4 years on contested catches. He had 21 contested catches in 2020, the last time he played a full season. So I think that's big. And I thought it was interesting. They come out day one and they're going right into red zone, and they're working red zone for the quarterbacks, the running backs, receivers, corners on the defensive side of the ball, which we'll get into. But they're pounding that in to the guys. And that's good to see that we don't only have Hunter Henry to go to in the passing game. In the red zone, we now have Devante Parker. And if you have Devante Parker, they're worried about a fade route or something like that. That just opens up a lot more opportunities for our other receivers, Kendrick Bourne, the little shiftier guys that can get in there. So I'm excited to see that. And then, like you mentioned, Taiwan Thornton, a lot of people, we don't know. We want to see him out there. He's exciting. His speed is definitely something that would bring a new dynamic to this Patriots offense, but we don't know exactly what we're going to get from him year one. And it's good to see him out there. He made a pretty good diving catch on his second touchdown, they said, which was over Malcolm Butler, or was it Malcolm Butler or
Taekwon's?
Yeah, his second, the diving catch was over, I want to say,
I think it was Marcus Jones, or beat Jack Jones and Marcus Jones.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was rookie on rookie crime is what they're talking
yeah.
about, which we'll get into, but makes a good contested catch, diving for it. And so I'm excited to see both those guys continuing camp. And if those two can come along with Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, and Nelson Aguilar, that it's going to be a very good receiving core. Just receivers alone, we all know what the tight ends can do.
And I think that was one of the biggest, I think the point you just made was one of the biggest things about this is, like you said, last year when we got down to the red zone, it was either hand the ball off or Hunter Henry's getting it, or we weren't scoring. And that was it. So the more options you can add to an offense, the harder it is for a defense to game plan for you, the harder it is for defense to stop you, and the more points you can therefore put on the board. So I'm really excited to see what Devante continues to have. Hopefully continues to do as well as he did today. And he was just day one, as soon as he got here, hyping up the crowd, thrilled to be here. He was feeding off their energy after he scored his second touchdown. And so I think he's going to fit in well here. I'm excited to see how he continues to progress. So that was huge. One wide receiver who didn't have as good of a day was Trey Nixon. And I mean, we talked about this the other day. He had a great mini camp. He was a guy people we said to have your eye on between him and Christian Wilkerson. And he didn't get off to the best start. He only had one target and it was intercepted. He had to run a lap. I think he had a false start at 2 at one point, something like that. So he didn't have the best day. That's a little discouraging for a guy that had high hopes so far after minicamp, but it's one day. Everybody has a bad day. We'll look to see what he can do tomorrow, if he can bounce back. But kind of moving on from the wide receiver position to the running backs, Ramondre was the lead running back for most of the day. And Ty Montgomery was a guy who had a touchdown catch from Mack at one point. He was kind of in that James White role. So we'll see how he continues to build off that and if he can find a role for himself on this football team. So that was interesting. And then Matt Patricia seemed to be the one who was calling in the plays on a walkie-talkie for most of the afternoon or most of the morning. So that's one thing to note, one thing to pay attention to as we kind of try to figure out the mystery of who's going to be the offensive coordinator and who's going to be calling the plays for the Patriots this season.
Yeah, and I think we both can agree that we don't know who it's going to be right now. I just want there to be consistency. If it's going to be Matt Patricia, let it be Matt Patricia. Let Mac hear one voice in his head from training camp to week one, all the way through the season. And I'm sure Joe Judge, Bill Belichick have their hand in things, but just let there be one voice. And if that's Matt Patricia, that's great. It was kind of interesting to hear. I think it was Trent Brown that said it, is he's excited to work with Matt Patricia because he's seeing the offensive line schemes now from a defensive guy's perspective. And that's always something that's a little bit different to learn as an offensive guy. But now you're kind of learning the flip side, what he was teaching his defensive linemen and his defensive schemes when he was in New England and Detroit. So you're kind of getting these guys that are learning a little bit different than what most people would be. And that's interesting. And then, like you mentioned, the running backs, Pierre Strong's down on the field with injury. Hopefully it's not too serious, but he doesn't get many team reps and stuff. So it was really all Ty Montgomery and Ramondre Stevenson, which is good. Ty Montgomery's kind of that wild card for this offense. He played 112 snaps in the slot last year, 81 in the backfield, 93 out wide at receiver. So he can do a lot of different things. And we all know Josh McDaniels loved a guy like that. I'm sure Bill Belichick values someone like that too. And I think you're going to see him playing a lot of different places in this New England offense.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of moving on to the quarterbacks for a second, really all we're focused on is Mack Jones here, obviously. And he had a solid day. It didn't sound like just absolutely tore apart the defense and was unstoppable, but he certainly didn't seem to make any mistakes. He didn't throw any interceptions. In 7v7, he went 5 for 6, and 11s, he went 8 for 10. So really solid day. I know there's no pads, so it's a little bit different. Obviously, there's not as much contact and all that stuff. It's easier to get open, but it seemed like he had a good day, good start to camp, getting some chemistry with these wide receivers, and just that's kind of all you can ask for the first day of training camp. I think it was like an hour and a half they were out there from like 9:30 Eastern time to 11, and couple important guys not practicing, like you mentioned, and James White, David Andrews, Jonathan Jones, Jabril Peppers. So overall, good first day for the offense. We'll transition to the defense in a minute, but I think it was a solid day one.
Yeah, and on the offensive line, just quick touch, it is going to be Trent Brown at left tackle, what it's looking like, and then Cole Strange at left guard. With David Andrews out, it was James Ferentz. How do you, I always butcher
James
this name.
Ferentz.
Ferentz, him at center, Owenu at guard or right guard, and then Isaiah Wynn at right tackle, which I think it's great that Isaiah, or not that Isaiah Wynn's at left tackle, so that Trent Brown's there. That's where he was when we won the Super Bowl. He said it alone. He said left tackle feels like home. And I think that it's a little bit more comfortable for Mack Jones to be able to sit back there in the pocket and realize his blind side's covered by, in my opinion, one of the best offensive tackles, definitely one of the biggest offensive tackles in the NFL, but surely one of the best ones, and the guy that we're going to have here for the next 2 seasons. We just signed an extension to. So I like seeing that move there. And then hopefully Isaiah Wynn can come around at right tackle, and maybe it was just a change of scenery. Maybe going from the left side to the right side is all he needed, and it will bump up his play. But we'll see how that is.
Yeah, for sure. So that's kind of good to get some confirmation on that. Just that's kind of what we expected, but we didn't know if it was kind of just a bluff by Bill to kind of send a message to Isaiah Wynn. But Trent, like you said he's comfortable there. I think that's a great order to have. And I think one of the big things that people haven't mentioned as much is that I think it's going to be really important for Trent Brown and David Andrews to be on both sides of our rookie left guard. I just think Cole Strange is going to benefit from having those two veterans who have been in this Patriots system for so long. I know Trent Brown left and came back, but these two guys have been part of this offensive line for a while, total combined years, the two of them. So I think having two veterans alongside on each side of him who are very talented players is going to certainly help out Cole Strange, especially in his rookie season.
For sure. Well, before we get to the defensive side of the ball, we got to tell you about our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play fantasy football this summer. Their Best Ball Mania 3 tournament has $10 million in total prizes. And the best part is you draft your fantasy team and that's it. There's no waivers, no trades, no in-season management. Underdog gives you your best score each week of the season, and the highest score at the end of the year wins. The champion of Best Ball Mania last year drafted in June, so there's no time like the present to join Underdog and take your shot at $1 million draft. Plus, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code PATSDRIVE, which is down on the screen and linked in the description. And that's 4 free entries into Best Ball Mania 3. Or you can join one of our fantasy leagues that we will be having coming up. So keep an eye out for that. So what are you waiting for? Head to underdogfantasy.com or download it on the App Store. Sign up for Underdog with the promo code PATSDRIVE and draft your Best Ball Mania 3 team today. That's underdogfantasy.com or the App Store, promo code PATSDRIVE on the screen or in the description. But without further ado, let's get into the defense side of the ball. A little bit more question marks there and a little bit things to talk about. So, Cole, what were your thoughts on the defensive side of the ball on day one?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes hand in hand. If somebody has a good day, somebody else has to have a bad day. And the wide receivers had a good day. The cornerbacks kind of had a bad day. Malcolm Butler didn't look great out there. Marcus Jones and Jack Jones. There was a lot of hype from Jack Jones in rookie minicamp and OTAs and stuff. He didn't look as good today. He didn't have as good of a day. The two rookies didn't. So cornerback room looked a little meh. One guy who did have a good day was Jalen Mills. He had a couple nice pass breakups, and he looked really solid. So that is a positive. Jalen Mills out there looking good. Malcolm Butler probably just needs to knock the rust off. I'm sure he's going to improve as we continue to get further into camp and he gets back into, I mean, he was just retired, so it's going to take him some time. But overall, the cornerbacks, they kind of struggled a little bit, gave up a couple touchdowns, couple contested ones to Devante Parker, and a couple of receivers, like we said, made some really nice catches. But overall, you'd like to see more consistency from this room, and they're young. A couple of guys are young, and one of them just came back from retirement. So I'm sure these guys are just going to need some time to continue to develop and get comfortable with this system before week one. It's only the first day, so it's hard to overreact one way or the other. They could have had a great day today, and they could be horrible this season. Just because they had one bad day doesn't necessarily say anything. But it's something to keep an eye out for.
For sure. And I think it's definitely interesting to look at the cornerback pairings. You had Jalen Mills, who we all knew would be a starter, Terrence Mitchell starting, and then with Jonathan Jones on the PUP list, you have Shaun Wade starting at slot corner, which I think is great. Shaun Wade, when he played his best ball at Ohio State was in 2018 and 2019. He took 400 plus snaps at that slot corner, and then he struggled a lot in 2020, his senior year, and that's when they moved him to predominantly the outside cornerback position. So I think that's cool to see him there. And then with the second unit, you have Malcolm Butler, Jack Jones, Marcus Jones, who seems to be the, group where you got a guy that's just coming out of retirement and two rookies. And, they're getting back to the swing of things. And some of them are getting accustomed to NFL speed, NFL style football. So I think it's no surprise to me that we saw a little bit of struggling from the defense. And I think you're going to see that a little bit more, especially with the secondary going throughout camp. We have a very good quarterback situation, and we have experienced receivers and tight ends on our team and in the NFL, and they're going against a very young, inexperienced unit. So I think you guys will continue to see the Patriots receivers take advantage of the DBs. But when I look at that, you're only getting better. Iron sharpens iron. When you're going up against these guys and you're getting your ass kicked every day and it's training camp and you're trying to win a spot, you're not going to take that. You either sink or fight or flight, right? You're either going to win that job and you're going to prove to Bill Belichick and them that you can play on Sundays, or you're going to be buried in the depth chart and you're going to be practice squad or something. So this competition will be good. I'm excited to continue to see how Jack Jones, Marcus Jones progress throughout training camp, because it's not about where they are today. It's about where they are when we start week one against Miami. And then same with Shaun Wade. I'm sure Jonathan Jones will be our starting slot corner, but we've had a lot of praise and a lot of people wanting to see reps from Shaun Wade. I hope that he continues to make an impact in training camp.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I mean, it's not surprising that the two rookies were kind of the ones that struggled the most. It's tough. It's a tough defense. It's a tough system in general, and they expect a lot out of you. And with some receivers that have started to build some chemistry with Mack Jones, and it's a day where there's no pads, it's tough to guard these guys. So it's no surprise. Malcolm Butler, like I said, he's probably just a little bit rusty. One thing I was surprised at was Terence Mitchell getting so much run with the starters. He looked to have a solid day, not really necessarily one way or the other. Didn't really make any big mistakes, which is good. But I saw a couple tweets of people saying to keep an eye on Terence Mitchell as a factor in this cornerback room. So maybe he's a guy who ends up stepping up. We talked about it yesterday on the podcast that somebody's got to step up in this room if we want to have a competitive defense, whether it's somebody in the cornerback room or the defensive line dominating and creating pressure and helping these corners out. So if a guy like Terence Mitchell can step up and then one of these rookies can develop well, and maybe you get some contributions from Shaun Wade, that'd be huge. So tough first day for the cornerbacks overall, but at the end of the day, it's day one, and there's a long way to go.
Yeah, and Terence Mitchell is a classic Bill Belichick story. He started off his career really well in Chicago and Dallas. And then progressively, as he's been getting older, he's 30 years old now. This is the type of guy that I could see coming in and having a solid year if he continues to keep this up. Bill Belichick got him for a steal. They take him as a free agent. It's a super under the radar signing. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler. He's not going to be, a major big time guy, but he's going to come in and Bill Belichick's going to make something out of him. Coming out of the University of Oregon, he had 4.6 speed when he ran in the combine in 2014. So it'll be interesting to see how he continues to develop. And he's one of the more veteran guys in the group. Unless you want to count Malcolm Butler, who is technically coming out of retirement. And I think you look at Jalen Mills, Terrence Mitchell, those are the two guys in the group that you're like, those are the leaders of this group. And they need to play like it, and they need to make examples for these younger guys. And then hopefully the younger guys can pass them by the end of the season, because that's where the future is in New England. So I'm excited to see Terrence Mitchell too. That was kind of a surprise also when you saw the rep count and who was going with the starters.
Yeah, and kind of moving on to the linebacker position, talking about a couple other young guys. Not a rookie anymore, but Cam McGrone and Mack Wilson were the two that were kind of in there more on the passing downs. And the guys who were considered the starters was Raekwon McMillan and Jawon Bentley. So those two guys are kind of seeming like going to be the starting two linebackers, and then mix in some speed with McGrone and Mack Wilson when they get the opportunity. So linebackers, not a whole lot on them today necessarily. It was kind of more of a passing day, obviously. So you're not going to see a ton on them, but I'm excited to see what this room has. I think there's some intriguing guys. Seeing what McGrone has coming off an injury. Obviously, if he wasn't injured, he wouldn't have been taken in the fifth round. He has a lot of potential, a lot of speed, sideline to sideline, good tackler, not bad in coverage, and it's going to be exciting to see what him and a guy like Mack Wilson can do on the field together. You wanted to get faster at linebacker, we got faster this year. So it's going to be about some of these young guys, like we've talked about in the past, stepping up, and they're going to have all the opportunities in the world between the four of those guys. Jawon Bentley has an opportunity to prove he can be a number one linebacker. I kind of see him as more of a 2 or a 3, but he's got an opportunity to prove himself this year. And Raekwon McMillan, people have had a lot of hope for him. I know he's had his injury problems and kind of been disappointing, some of the things that have happened to him in his career so far, but he looked good before he got injured last year, and I think he's certainly going to have a lot of reps and a big opportunity here, and it seems like the Patriots are high on him.
Yeah, he was getting a lot of reps last year before he tore his ACL. Does that, they still re-sign him. They obviously want him here, and I'm excited for him too. I don't think it's going to be, you're not going to see Raekwon McMillan and Jawon Bentley just play rundowns on Sundays, and then Mack Jones or Mack Wilson and Cameron McGrone on pass downs. They'll all get reps. I think that they're all looking at, okay, how can we scheme with these guys? What do they all have? Maybe tomorrow it'll flip and the other two play on pass downs, because it's all about getting better, progressing. But I think all four of those linebackers right there have a dang good chance of playing a lot of reps for us this year, because there's a lot of reps missing in the linebacker room between Jamie Collins, Calvin Noy, and Dante Hightower now being gone. The only one that really is coming back is Jawon Bentley, and he's the only one that's really played snaps in this system. And Mack Wilson coming over, he obviously played in Cleveland the last couple of years, but he's new to the system. Cameron McGrone and Raekwon McMillan were both hurt last year, didn't really play any reps. So I'm excited to see that linebacker room new and improved, a little different than what we're used to with the bigger thumping style linebackers. You still got Jawon Bentley and guys that can do it, but it's definitely a new look linebacking core, and we'll continue to see how they do against a good running back room throughout training camp.
Yeah, and they'll certainly be tested. The run defense that we have, that was kind of a concern last year. That was kind of not as prominent, not as noticeable for some people, but the run defense was not spectacular last season. So losing a bigger guy like Hightower, not great. But if you can get a guy who has some speed and physicality and is young and hungry, stopping the run seems to be just as much a mental thing as a physical thing, and just going after it, being aggressive, being smart with how you're attacking the run game, because there's so many different schemes and things you need to do. You're not just chasing the back at all times. Sometimes you need to take out blockers and do different things like that. So I am excited to see what this linebacking group has, even if it's inexperienced. It's some new faces and some guys that have a lot of talent and a lot of upside. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But moving on to another position, the safety position. One guy who factored in more than expected was Joshua Bledsoe, another young guy. He was drafted last year, didn't get any playing time. He was hurt. He came back for like 1 or 2 weeks of practice, I believe, mid-season last year, and then was placed right back on IR or something like that. So, but he was healthy towards the end of the season, but they kind of just redshirted him basically from missing so much of the year with an injury. So he had a couple pass breakups. He looked good. He seemed to be around the ball a lot and pretty active, and it seemed like in the right places because he was all over the place. So he looked pretty good. And then Adrian Phillips had a pass breakup as well. We know what Adrian Phillips has done. He got an extension again, and he's been a big factor of this team and one of the most underrated players on this football team, in my opinion. He does the right thing at all times. I think him and Devin McCourty learning from each other. I think McCourty being there for him to teach him things and get him comfortable in this defense has been huge for his development.
Yeah, and Joshua Bledsoe is another one of those guys that's kind of an oddball. His last year in college in 2020, he actually played more reps at slot corner than any other position. So he's a guy that has experience covering, receivers out there. And then he's transitioning to more of a safety. And he's another guy that was hurt a lot last year and was hurt coming out in the draft process. So he falls a little. New England grabs him in the 6th round. We'll see what he's able to do. But we all know Bill loves to rotate his safeties. They have a lot of good safeties in there between McCourty, Duggar, Phillips, Bledsoe, Jabril Peppers. They have a lot of guys in that room that can do a lot of different things and show a lot of different looks and play in a lot of different systems. So it'll be interesting to see how they continue to rotate that room and how they continue to utilize all their skill sets to help this defense out and, make it ultimately hard for the offenses to scheme against you and be able to tell what you're in all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And one last thing to wrap it up a little bit was special teams. The guys returning punts today was Kendrick Bourne, Jack Jones, Marcus Jones, Trey Nixon, and Kyle Duggar. So a couple of guys you expect in there, a couple of guys maybe you didn't expect. I didn't expect KB to be back there returning punts necessarily, but I mean, he was good with the ball in his hands last year. So that's something to keep an eye on. But I don't know necessarily that they would risk his health, one of our top receivers last season, being back there catching punts. But something to keep an eye on. And also Mack Jones, I heard was a place he was holding the ball for a kicker at one point. I'm not sure, just for safety scenario. I know I heard a story of him doing that at Alabama one year for a couple of years or something. So he knows how to do it. Maybe it's just an emergency break glass kind of thing, but I just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, guys, that's day 1 of camp. That's the wrap up right there. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment on the video. What are your thoughts? Who are you excited for? What do you want to continue to see as the Patriots go through camp and preseason? And continue to stay up to date with the channel and our Instagrams. Use the promo code for Underdog Fantasy. Help support the channel. And we will talk to you guys next time.